Moms Unleashed. This episode, we're talking about the working mom, the default parent, which is the buzzword of the month, the year, I don't know, and how important it is to have a Nanny Hazel. So let's get started. So I want to first jump in and say this is my first summer as a full-time working mom, and it is kicking my ass.
Yeah.
It's been really hard. Megan knows that because we work together. And she is constantly checking in on me to make sure I'm not going to quit and run away. So I need to know, like, from when you got started to where you are now, how has that process been for you? How many times have you wanted to give up? What has it been like to get to where you are today? Do you want to start,
working
Julie?
mom?
As a working
Sure. So, of course, I started Mabel's Labels 18 years ago. And when I did that, I wanted to leave the traditional workforce.
Because you were a lawyer.
You're right. So I'm recovered. So I did that thing where I stopped working the traditional workforce, but then started a job, but didn't get any help with the kids because I thought, well, I started this to be with the kids, so I should just be with the kids.
Yeah.
So when my 5th kid was almost a year old, I finally got Nanny Hazel, which made a lot of sense. Should have done it 3 kids ago. Before that. But yeah, you just can't do it without the help. For me, thinking I could be raising 5 kids and running a business, a startup, it's just not possible. And in fact, once I had the 6th baby in the summer, I had Nanny Hazel, and I also hired another part-time nanny to help with the biggie kids. Actually, it was Kathy Buckworth's daughter, Tori. She dealt with the big kids, and then Nanny Hazel had the babies, because also, in the summer, Mabel's Labels is busy. We're making labels 24/7, so when everybody's trying to chill a bit and go to the cottage, we have a blackout period. Nobody can take any time off. It's not like that anymore, but at the time, that was like all hands on deck. So summer was my busiest season as a working mom.
Okay, so one of the things that I struggle with, and I don't know if you guys have found this, I didn't know when it was time to invest in childcare to offset you have to put in the hours in order to make a business successful, but it's hard to validate putting money into childcare when you don't have any money coming in. So how did you guys get to that point where you thought, okay, it's worthwhile for me to pay for childcare and take this time away from my kids to fuel something that I'm passionate about and care about in starting a business?
Well, I think with someone like you or I in particular, because we're writers and our jobs are really flexible, it's something we struggle with even more, because if you're running a business, I know it's hard for Julie, it's hard for everybody, it's hard if you're a naturopath, it's hard for anyone, but if you're a writer and there's no set hours, you can realistically be with your kids in the day and then just stay up super late to get your job done.
This is where Atlanta
is. Yeah, and so it's very hard to justify childcare where you go, well, I could put in 2 hours in the afternoon while they're, at preschool or at a play date, or, this friend is offered to stop by, or your mother-in-law is offered to come by, but 2 hours every once in a while is not childcare. So you end up working 7, 8, 9 hours at night. And so I was famous for just being oh, I'll drop my kids at preschool. They'll be there for 2.5 hours in the morning. I'll work on my laptop at a Starbucks, and then I will parent the rest of the day. And then I will put in a 7-hour workday when my kids go to bed at 7 p.m. And I would be up until really late. And then I would do that revenge procrastination bedtime, stay up super late. I remember talking to Alana years ago, and she was like, oh, I'm starting a new sleep program for adults. Do you want to try? And I cried and said, I can't, because if you fix my sleep, I won't be able to work.
Yeah.
Right. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I was you can help me, but I won't let you.
I do remember that. I built a sleep business by not sleeping, because I did the same thing, because that's how I had to do it. I had 3 young kids, 3 kids under 4. I was a full-time stay-at-home mom, and I remember hitting publish on Goodnight Sleep site when my twins were in their bouncy seats. The youngest are twins. They were 10 months old. My daughter was 3.5, 4. And I worked the same way. You work around nap times. I'm fortunate where I had help from my mom, help from my mother-in-law, so they would come in every now and then. So I didn't have to. I was very fortunate where I didn't have to pay for childcare if I really needed it. But I would work until, all hours of the night building this business until they went to full-time school.
Yeah.
So then there was that shift. But I also found when I had a full day of work, if I had, if they were at my mom's or, at my mother-in-law's, I found I got more done when I only had 2 hours then if I had a full day, suddenly I was like, oh.
That can happen.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I work better with just like a 2-hour crunch time where you got to get stuff done. So yeah, I mean, listen, I built a sleep business on very little sleep.
The funny thing too about the sleep was when my kids were little, and everybody had little kids, and they would lie in bed with their kids and read books and sometimes fall asleep, and I was like, I cannot lie down with my kids. If I risk falling asleep, I could lose 2 or 3 hours. And how am I going to build my empire if I'm reading books and falling asleep? Plus, I mean, there's 6 of them. How would I pick who I was going to sleep with? So, like, if you need to sleep with somebody, find a sibling, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I just couldn't. And I was actually just telling Posey this morning, because she said, Mom, what was the worst kind of sleep that you can remember having? And I was, for many years, I would have 3 hours sleep. I would get up and breastfeed, and then I would get 2 hours sleep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. And weirdly, I could never do it now, but at the time, I don't know if it was on adrenaline or what, but it seemed
Well, it's
fine.
just what you had to do.
Right?
Yeah.
When you're breastfeeding at all, bets are off.
It's
Because
weird.
I'm breastfeeding my 10-month-old, and everyone's like, "How's your sleep?" I'm like, "How many times does he wake up?" I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Constantly. is the
Yeah,
answer.
but it's like I have no concept of how many times he wakes or
Right.
not.
Mhm.
I will remember every time my 5-year-old wakes up though,
Yeah.
or my 8-year-old. But the baby, not a clue, and it just you roll with it. And that lack of sleep, I don't know. It doesn't matter.
The thing too, though, with like the working, and to your question, Annie, about when to invest, like that, I had a big problem with that too, and it wasn't
Yeah.
so much. It did feel like I should be bringing money in if I should. But then there's also sometimes you get that even your working traditional job, if you have a couple kids in daycare, big bucks, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you get your check and then you just hand it over. But at the same time, sometimes that's necessary.
Yeah.
So, it might take longer to grow your business if you don't have childcare. But if you do have childcare, and it's kind of cart before horse stuff, it might seem counterintuitive, but if you start investing in your own time and getting that business running a little bit sooner because you have help, then long run, you might be making
Yeah.
more money.
And I think it's hard to know too. For me, childcare was a mental health thing. Like, I needed it for my mental health. It's also a privilege thing to find where that money is going to come from to put those kids in daycare in order to, and I hate that this is the way that people look at women working and having a career, chase a dream. Like, I wasn't, in the eyes of a lot of people, Annie freelancing and Annie writing a book and Annie being a blogger is Annie chasing a dream, not Annie trying to have a career and build something so she can be a human being outside of being a parent. I just had to do it in a non-traditional way because I was navigating a neurodiverse kid and 3 kids in under 4 years, and like it all came to a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to have a mental breakdown if I don't pay for the childcare. But where is that money going to come from? What are we going to sacrifice for it to get there? And I will say it was so freaking worth it
Yeah.
to finally make that call. And I hired a cleaner too because I just
Yes.
found myself.
Sometimes
Just
that's a
Julie's
priority.
number one.
It's a better investment than
Sometimes
childcare.
that's a priority. Like, you know what? Maybe you don't need the new car. Maybe you don't need the family trip to
Yeah.
Florida. Maybe for your sake, your mental health.
Yeah.
That if you don't have that, what you got?
Yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone literally puts my underwear away like
Yeah.
once a week, and it is the biggest gift I have given myself.
It's
Yeah.
tricky though, because the thing I always struggle with is I grew up with not a lot of money, and I am more financially secure than my parents were. We're not wealthy, but I'm more financially secure than like I would have been as a child growing up.
Yeah.
And so when we say things like, oh, well, we won't do that trip or we won't do whatever, I think back to like a generation ago and going, well, there were no trips. There wasn't like when there isn't stuff to cut, what do you cut? So I'm very
Yeah.
conscious of, even if I'm sacrificing and cutting something, that's a privilege I have to be able to like trim my
To make
budget.
that
I know
choice.
you're conscious of that, and you guys too.
Yeah.
But to your point about like not being taken seriously to some extent, like I have a whole essay in my book called "My Job Is Not a Hobby," which is about feeling like even though I was working and contributing to my household, I went to university, I have a career, I feel like my job really is, it's like the chasing the dream thing,
Yeah.
especially because I'm a writer. I have a book out. A lot of what I do is editorial work in magazines. So if I have something come out in like Today's Parent or Chatelaine and I'm really proud of it, people are kind of like, oh, that's good. Like, it's cute.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, you got
Yeah.
something. But like the last 2 years, I've made more money than my husband has, and my husband works at like a large university in the city, and so I have freelanced and worked my butt off to the point where I make a competitive income. Again, not like a super high wealth level of income, but a really competitive income, and I will still have family members, like extended family. Someone said to me like 2 weeks ago, something about working, and I said, oh yeah, like it's hard working with kids and working a lot. And she went, kind of like looked confused at me and said, yeah, well, I guess like for you, like being home with the kids is work. And I'm like, well, no, I work full time and I have the kids, but because I work in my home and everything I do is like in the arts or peripherally in the arts, it's very much viewed as like I'm working for fun, and anything I bring in is like fun money or hobby
That chapter
money.
was so relatable to me.
Thank
You
you.
can imagine like Mabel's Labels, and people are like, wait, you've got like a lawyer, a teacher, a financial planner, and a graphics manager, and they're quitting everything to make labels in a basement.
Yeah.
And you know, it was kind of like that whole mompreneur thing, like as though, you know, it kind of was like, yeah, we were hobbyists. It's like, no, actually, I've never made a label as a hobby before ever in my life. Like, this is, want to see our business plan? This is serious business, you know?
Yeah.
And people, especially like generation up, like my, you know, my grandparents were first generation Canadian, and they worked hard, and they saw us with these stable jobs, and they're like, what are you doing? But eventually I got to the point where like, come on, Grandpa, let's have a look. She's now making more than she did as a teacher. She's now making more than she did as a lawyer. And then he was like, oh, good girls. Then once the money was there.
I know,
Yeah.
but it's almost like you have to be successful at some point in order to be deserving of the recognition
Or even
and
then you're kind of
validated.
not.
And I find, like, my husband's an engineer, so anytime we're out with, whether it's family or friends, Dave, how's work going? Dave, how's work
Oh
going?
yeah.
Annie, how are the kids? And I'm like, guys, like, I'm doing a lot of stuff too here. Like, no one asks Annie how work is going because it's a hobby for
Well,
Annie.
people don't know about the business side of doing a job like ours, because I think if they see certain jobs, they go, even with Elena, they go, oh, you're running a business, you have a sleep site, you have consultants, you have clients. We're selling like words and things like that. And it's very abstract. And it's like, here's my thoughts. And I put them on paper and I would like money for them. And people take it, like, they're very weird about it. So even when I'm doing really well, I think it's treated very, they don't think of the admin, they don't think of pitching clients, they don't think of your marketing plan, they don't think of the taxes you're doing and keeping track of HST and remitting stuff on time. And there's a whole business side
Wearing
of
all
things.
the hats.
Yeah.
And
All the
also
hats.
maybe part of that is because what they're seeing is that you are in the mom space.
Yeah.
You're writing, you're whatever. So they think, oh, well, this is just something they're doing when they're not momming.
And something you enjoy.
But when do
because
you
I love
do
my job.
anything when you're not momming? Like, you're always momming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, that hat doesn't disappear.
But it's
No, yeah.
it's true what you say. When you're doing something that you love, some people don't see it as a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the whole, I can't quote it properly, but you know there's that like meme where there's the sign that people have where they're like, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And then there's the crossed out version where it's like, do something you love and you'll have no boundaries and you'll work constantly, but you'll probably enjoy it to some extent, like it's something like that. I'm like, like I love what I do. I love writing. I'm so proud that I have a book out. I'm so proud that I'm self-employed and I've made a career and that I've made like a sustainable career, that like I've been doing this. I had a full-time job like in the workforce, like traditionally for I think 2 years after university, and then I quit and immediately got pregnant and was like, I'm gonna be self-employed. So I feel proud that I've succeeded, but I do know that like I think the only people who really know that I've actually succeeded are me and my husband, because he sees me work and he sees my tax returns. And that's really it.
And then also you add that whole working mother thing, and then having gone through COVID, I mean, we were all had our kids at home.
Yep.
So we're trying to manage like, and it's not homeschooling because nobody signed up for homeschooling. My friends who homeschool want to homeschool. They have the skills to homeschool. They've got a network. Like that's not, we were doing pandemic home, you know, remote learning. So that was also another thing that I really saw fall on moms, is that suddenly now we had to do our jobs and also, you know, make sure kids were on the proper Zooms or doing their, handing in their things or communicating with the teachers and that sort of thing. So that really took a toll. We know that the pandemic took an extra toll on working moms.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, for sure.
For sure. And so Megan was working at a larger, I don't know if we want to say the name.
Yeah, you can say
Mondelez?
Mondelez,
So she was working there and she walked away.
Through pandemic? Okay.
So I came back from mat leave about 6 weeks before everything shut
Oh,
down.
wow.
So we had daycare all set up. It was the plan to go back full time, and then it closed. And so my husband and I were home, and he's an entrepreneur, so he kind of, we're almost opposite in our house, is that nobody really asks him about work, and everyone kind of dismisses what he does as, not as valid as the amount of work that he's putting into it. But yeah, we were home with a 1-year-old by ourselves with zero help, both working more than full time for the first, I don't even know how many months of COVID, and finally we let my parents in to help, but we were not okay. Like, the parents were not okay, because a 1-year-old cannot be just sort of put anywhere, and we were
You have to take care of them.
They need to be supervised. So it was rough, and then I did that for another year or so, and I ended up having to take a medical leave for surgery, and ended up with a weird complication that put me back on leave. I left for about 6 months and just said, I cannot do this anymore. And it took hitting total rock bottom burnout and physically not okay to finally admit that the pace that I had been going for the last 12 years was not what I wanted to do anymore, and not worth it.
But then you find you create your own business and you work at that pace again.
But that's what we do.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
That's how that works.
But it's something that you love. But I'm curious, did all of you, before you left your traditional jobs, hit a place of burnout that encouraged you to pursue something else? Or did it just, how did these...
I didn't.
No,
I didn't
But
either.
I would say that I graduated university and then was working in a job I really enjoyed. The job changed a lot. I was working for a digital marketing agency that owned a magazine, and I was the editor-in-chief of the magazine, and I was working on a bit of digital copy. And then they eliminated the magazine component. So it was something where my job was secure and I could stay, but it would be in just the copy marketing side, which I do have a background in, but it wasn't what I wanted to do full time, and I knew I wanted to have a baby. I'd just gotten married. So we were in a really good spot where my husband had just secured a good job, and we were living in a tiny basement apartment in Toronto, so our living expenses weren't very high. So we were like, I'll just go freelance. So I did that, but then I had hyperemesis with both of my kids, which means I threw up nonstop for 9 months and was really sick and didn't work at all when I was pregnant. And then I worked part-time when they were babies. And then it was like, they both went off to kindergarten back to back because they're a year and a half apart, 1 school year apart. So I had about 5 years where it was like a blur, where I just worked enough to keep my foot in the door and keep my brain stimulated and kind of keep myself in that world, because I love working, but I also got to be with my kids. So on the surface, it was very best of both worlds. That was the part that I felt the most burnout though. So that was after I left the traditional job, and that was when I was trying to do everything with no childcare. And then when they went to school, I had a bit of a reality check and went oh, this is what it's like when your kids leave the house during the day and you're working alone in your house, not with people grabbing you constantly, and feeding schedules and napping and everything. So
It's so
Can we
interesting.
stop for
too.
1 second?
Sure.
I'm so sorry. I need a drink because
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
I'm so
No.
sorry, you guys. Okay, good. Sorry.
See, I'm kind of the reverse, because every time I've had a kid, I've redefined my business.
okay.
Interesting.
So
That's interesting.
it's-
When did you start your business versus when did you have your first child?
I got pregnant during board exams, so I had my oldest actually the day I got my license.
Oh, wow.
So that was come home from the hospital and I got the letter that I got my license. So that's forever ingrained in my mind. And then I started working when he was 7, just before he was 8 months old. So that's when he started daycare, and that was its own issue because it's first baby, I mentally wanted to go back to work, but then it was the mom guilt of I'm sending him to daycare, and then the daycare illnesses that just never stop. And then my second, I actually worked with him from 8 months until he took my oldest spot at daycare. But after I had him, it was I was baby wearing in the office and had him there, which was amazing because I see moms and babies and they were this is great. So I redefined, and then now after my third, it's now I really want to just like, I love my, like, little kid patients. I will never give them up, but I really want to help moms balance and support and understand that you can't do both. Like, you legit can't, but we can make it work better. So, like, an analogy I use is everyone has balls in the air. You just can't drop the glass ones, but drop all the plastic ones, because you're gonna drop something. You just will.
For sure.
So it's priorities. So don't drop the soccer game if that's an important one for you today, but maybe you drop a deadline and it happens the next day. And you just have to, every day those balls change, but that was the biggest thing. And that change for me was probably, I don't know if it's like just add a third kid and like everything goes wonky. But I wouldn't change it. Like, I'm so happy we had all three, and like the spaciousness between them is great. But it's also, they're all at very different developmental stages.
Right.
So you're just
tricky.
like, the balls are dropping frequently.
Well, I thought it was interesting too how the announcement was made. Serena Williams made the announcement that she's retiring from tennis because working and being a mom is just something's got to give. And I'm like, here's somebody with all the money and has all the, and she's finding it too challenging. What help do we have?
You know? And she put out something, I should have read it if I knew we were going to talk about this, but she put out something basically saying she wasn't feeling this like sense of like joy and peace about retiring. Like, she was really conflicted. And it's that you think like, but you have all the support in the world in theory. But there's only one you for your kids. So it's impossible. You can't outsource momming. You can outsource childcare, but you can't outsource the actual like experience of motherhood and connection you have with your kids. So which is, I think, I mean, you guys like tell me if you feel differently. Like, I invest a lot of myself in my career, but I find motherhood the most emotionally draining, because if my kids are sad, I am sad. If my kids are angry, I'm like, and I'm not one of those like bulldozer parents who's like, I'll fix everything for them, but the empathy is there. So even if you're making them fix it for themselves, you're still like, your brain is just on your kids and your heart is with your kids. And so you can never, I could be writing an article and thinking like, oh, my one child's really struggling with this one thing, and that doesn't go away in the back of your mind.
See, and that's interesting you say that, because that is true of me, but I have noticed like with Daddy-O, like if like say somebody wasn't feeling well and they went off to school, like all day I'd be like, I wonder how they're doing. Maybe I'll just email the teacher. He would walk out the door and that would not even cross his mind. And maybe, and he loves them just as much and cares for them just as much. It's just, he would count on me to carry that, right? Which I did anyway. So, but I remember being so like, that's amazing. You just walk out, go to work, and you're not thinking about, oh, I wonder if, the speech therapist turned up at school today like they were supposed to, or like just, all
the
those
mental
things.
load. That's what they say. The mental. That's what can be so exhausting, I find, with motherhood, particularly, and then running the business, because then we also have the mental load of our business. We're all the bosses and wearing all the hats, as we were saying before, but then it's the mental load of motherhood. It's just, how are they feeling? Oh, I have to make this appointment. What are we going to make for dinner? I have to book this. It's constant, and it's just, and for me, that is probably the most exhausting thing. That's where the burnout. So I didn't actually have burnout to start the business. Burnout came afterwards. Once the business was started and the kids were out, then the burnout ensued. Right? And we just pushed through.
I find, so my oldest,
which isn't a good thing.
My oldest
We're not advocating for
it, but it's what I do.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly.
My oldest has ADHD, and this is my first summer as a working mom, and he is so fucking dysregulated this summer because I'm not there to like keep him in check. And we hired this like lovely 15-year-old, and I'm realizing if I'm going to do this again, I have to hire a child care specialist who has experience with special needs children and keeping them regulated. But when I looked this summer, they were $30 to $35 an hour, and like there goes like my whole salary and then some. So like it's really hard for all parents. But then when you throw the like neurodiversity on top of that and having a child that needs extra support, like I am struggling, and my kid's not sleeping. Like he does not want to go to sleep. I'm not sleeping. He started talking with a Boston accent all of a sudden because he's so dysregulated. So I'd be like, Mummy, can I have like British? It's like like British baby Boston. So, mommy, can I have some water? And we're just like, what is happening?
Who are you?
I called
I'm
my
down with that.
I called my doctor and I was like, are we having a neurological emergency here? Like, do I need to take him to the hospital? And she's like, no, he's just dysregulated. And like, I the guilt I have on like trying to build a career and thinking I did the right thing by having childcare come into my house and like it's all gone to shit. Like it's not been easy for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is genuinely unfair. My eldest child has autism. My youngest one has ADD, ADHD, and LD. And it does feel just so fundamentally unfair. Like I think about kids. Like obviously, if you're at a certain socioeconomic level, they're going to have some privileges that go with that. But I find like with kids who are neurodiverse, it's even like there's such a bigger gap. Like when my kid, I was spending $40,000 a year on therapy for my son.
Yeah.
Like we were living.
This
like,
is your oldest with
yeah.
autism?
And I always wonder what he would look like in a parallel universe if we hadn't done that. Like, what would that look like? I mean, now he's out the house, he's at university, he's like he's a taxpayer,
Yeah.
But I just think like here we are, like as moms, it's hard enough with our neurotypicals, but then the emotional stuff that goes with the neurodiverse kid and the finances, like kids who are neurodiverse are expensive.
And the appointments and being on top of the speech therapist and the behavioral therapist and like I need a behavioral therapist of my own now because I can't like figure out.
Well, what's so fascinating, and I don't know if you have all caught this, and like I think sometimes now what we're realizing is like I've got so many mom friends, and I kind of feel it myself a bit. Like I'm wondering if I may have just had that ADD bullet skim me a little bit. Like you're seeing a lot of that apple tree, like does it fall?
I got diagnosed like 3 days ago.
Like moms are getting diagnosed, and
Yeah.
actually they're finding it quite a relief because then they know why their kid triggers them, and they can put strategies in place, and also then they this is what I'm about. This is why I have an answer.
This is why I didn't like breezes growing up. Like
Yeah.
the things that make sense.
It's like 10
Like anytime someone would splash me, it's a running joke in my family. My brother and my dad would splash me with water at the cottage, and I would erupt like a volcano. I hated it so much, and now I'm like, you guys are bullies.
Yeah. Now I know.
It's crazy, and I think because parents are more aware and we're pushing to get our children, and I know there's like some pushback on this. My son was diagnosed maybe 6 months ago, and people are like, why are you diagnosing your 5-year-olds? Like, why are you pushing to have your 5-year-old diagnosed? And I was like, because I can get him help earlier. Like, we're our generation. I'm 33 in a few weeks, and like just getting diagnosed now. So
but I think
Yeah.
like our generation going through school, especially girls, no one noticed because you were either in sports or you were in the arts, and like
or we were trying to conform because that's what we were
like
supposed
you
to do.
you fit the like box
Yeah.
where it was more the males, like the boys in our class, because
They
they
present differently.
they were bouncing off the walls.
You
They were
can't
doing
miss
all
them
that.
when they're
But
Whereas
for
we were
us, like
trying to blend
our brain chemistry, our hormone chemistry, like everything's so different. So that's why we're noticing a lot more of those in their 30s and in their 40s who are getting diagnosed now, because it's, oh, well, that's why I think this way, or that's why this happened. And the relief is unreal once you get that. And then like I have a couple good friends, they just started on medication, and they're like, I didn't know like I could think this way because I apparently was neurodiverse and didn't know, kind of thing. And that's just, as a parent, having that relief can also shift that guilt and shift your working dynamic.
Yeah.
I think it helps
Completely.
you with your own kids a lot, because I know one of my kids has pretty significant anxiety and goes to cognitive behavioral therapy for it. That kid also has autoimmune conditions, so they see medical specialists for their medical problems, and has just like a bunch of stuff, all invisible, all very low key. But I grew up with a lot of anxiety that wasn't diagnosed as a teenager, and so when I noticed it in my child, I was like, oh, like we're gonna go get help for this right away.
Yeah.
And it is helpful, because you start, that early intervention is so helpful. And even if you feel like you're kind of failing and you're going like, is this the right way to approach it with them? Am I helping them enough? Do they need a different kind of this? Like, at least you're trying, at least you're responding to them with the knowledge that that there's some anxiety there or whatever else the issue may be. And so it's not something that blindsides them when they're in their 30s or something.
Yeah.
Like, we use the language like they know they have anxiety. We talk about why they go to CBT. We talk about why they feel the way they, and you can do the age appropriate stuff with big feelings and kind of, but the catastrophizing, all of that stuff that becomes the worry monster. We do all of that stuff. But I'm so glad that we started that path when they were 4 or 5 versus when they were 25 and figured it out themselves and were like, why did nobody help me?
Yeah. Well, and so my oldest really struggles with sleep. And I'm interested to hear your perspective on this because he was up every 45 minutes.
Sorry, how old is your oldest?
He's 6 now.
Okay.
He was up every 45 minutes from when he was 4 months old until 2. Every 45 minutes he would wake up and he would sleep crawl and ram his head into the crib and pull himself up. He was just up all night long, wired, wouldn't want a nap, dropped his naps by 18 months. And we tried sleep training, all different methods, and he would cry until he would throw up. And then we found out he has ADHD and he still struggles with going to sleep as a kid. And so a few weeks ago, he's laying in bed and he's frustrated. He's like, why can't I go to sleep, Mommy? I hate going to sleep. I hate it so much. And I was like, okay, we're going to let the cat out of the bag. I'm going to tell him what's going on. I was like, baby, you have something called ADHD. And your mind is very busy. You have all of these cool thoughts going through your head all the time, all these big ideas. And that's why you can't go to sleep. And he was like, oh, God gave me the gift of, he goes to Catholic school. Dad's an atheist. He goes to Catholic school. But he's like, God gave me the gift of ADHD because we were talking about all the superpowers that he has. But from a sleep perspective, if you have a baby who's really struggling to sleep, but you don't know that, 6 years down the road, they're going to grow up and get a diagnosis.
Right.
Grow up. But you know what I mean? How do you deal with that as a parent? Because I have a lot of guilt now for trying to get him to sleep when it
normally.
just normally.
Yeah, normal.
Yeah.
A normal sleep routine, the bath, the lavender, the bubble, the cozy music and the sound machines, and none of that worked for us. So as a parent, when do you give up on that crap and just not crap, but you know what I mean? When do
you know what you build your business on?
No, that's not sorry. Are there flags?
Yeah.
For God, now I feel.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Are there flags when they're little to look out for to help support them when they are one of those children that just will not fucking sleep?
So the first thing I will say is please release that guilt because there was no way of knowing when he was 6 months old what the diagnosis that you were going to get when he was 6 years old. So you have to release that guilt for sure. You can see a flag of something like an ADHD diagnosis.
And that's
at
something
that
that you're
age.
trained to see too, right?
For older kids, absolutely. But for a 6-month-old baby, probably not.
Yeah.
I always tell parents, listen, I do what I do. I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
If either what we're doing or what you're doing isn't working, forget not working for you, because there could be different reasons why it's not working for you. But if it's not sitting right with you, if you're not feeling right doing it, then you have to do what you have to do to feel good about the next steps. And who am I to tell you to change something if it's not something that you want to change, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of certain diagnosis, we can't see red flags necessarily at certain ages.
Yeah.
But with older kids, if we were seeing, a lot of bedtime battles, a lot of difficulties falling asleep at night, and we were trying all the strategies and it just wasn't working, then that's when it might be a good idea to have a conversation with your doctor. I'm not a doctor, so I can't make that diagnosis myself, and nor would I. But that's when it might be worth having that conversation with your family doctor. But you can't feel guilty about trying to sleep train your baby. You had no idea that, and it's not even to say at that age that's what was going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's overlap, right? Because you think how many of our kids are either ADHD or anxious or intellectually gifted. Those are the three I always think of because my child doesn't have ADHD but is really, really intellectually gifted, which is like a neurodiverse thing as well,
Yeah.
and has huge anxiety. And those things together kind of mimic ADHD a little bit when you take the symptoms and pop them together. And I was the same way. I was the exact same way, where it was like a diagnosis of like gifted and anxious, and it presents a lot like ADHD. And it's like, how do you sift through all of that
And
with a little kid?
And like parents are always, I remember, my kids are older now, the youngest is 13, and I can remember parents in the old days thinking giftedness was like a badge of honor. They'd be like, oh, I think my kid is bored, I think they're gifted. I'm like, believe me, you don't want a gifted kid.
Yeah.
Y'all want just a B student.
Yeah.
I can tell you,
Yeah.
I've got the whole gamut of all of
I'm
them, and
married
you
to a
just
gifted
want a
kid.
nice, you
Yeah.
just
We're
have
right
there. But it is funny about the babies and sleeping, and I can only speak about this anecdotally because I've had 6 of them, and that is my babies that have been too easy as infants were the ones who had problems later. Had
Interesting.
autism.
That's interesting.
And yeah,
Interesting.
they didn't want my cuddles, they didn't demand me, they didn't want to feed, they were quite happy on their own. They,
Interesting.
and then my mom said to me, she's like, babies, if they're too easy or too hard, you have to take alert to that.
Okay.
But then you don't know what's too easy or too
Yeah.
hard. Yeah, one
Exactly.
baby, I mean, back
No
with my
frame of
oldest, I
reference.
mean, what do I know what a kid with autism is gonna look like?
I
Then I
know.
have Posey, and I'm like, oh, why do you want mommy when you fall down, buddy?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
she comes crying to me every
Yeah.
time she falls down. Why don't you do that?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you start connecting the dots,
Yeah.
right?
They're
Yeah.
they're all so different, and if we go
Right.
back to being like working moms, and I say working moms always, I'm sure you guys too, with like the caveat of like being a stay-at-home mom is so much work.
Oh, yeah.
So when I say
Yeah.
working moms, I mean working outside the house, just because it's a different challenge.
Yeah.
It's not a bigger challenge necessarily; it's a different challenge. And you being home with 3 kids and having kids with special needs, for sure, being home with kids is not a vacation.
No.
But if you're trying to run a business or work outside the home and give that your full energy, and then you're parenting your kids, but you're not also taking into account all your kids need to be parented kind of differently.
Oh yeah.
And I've only got 2. You've got 3. You've got 3. You've got 1. We've all got our different, but like it's a lot to parent a bunch
6
of
different
kids.
parenting styles right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because people always think, I'm like, I can't apply the same
No.
parenting style. There's
No.
6 different
Yeah.
people.
You're not like mom, and this is how I mom
Yeah.
indefinitely.
Like, you
Like
know
this
how
is how I
you
parent
people
this child, and
respond
that. Yeah.
I always say, to treat my kids the same would be to treat them with inequality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that. Because my daughter, who's my youngest and she's 2,
Yeah.
cleans up after her brothers, washes her face after she eats. Like she is an angel. My boys are probably hanging off the chandelier right now, and like one of them never wears underwear because he just they're so different, and I have to parent them all different. And then there's judgment based off of that from European relatives. I don't know why I knocked on wood.
I'm like, Annie, this isn't going to make them go away.
From European relatives, and people out in public are just like, especially when you have a child. Now when I see parents whose kid is having a meltdown in public, I have so much more respect than being like, oh, they need to work on that discipline. That
Oh,
you think
yeah, for
they,
sure.
But no, it's like good for them on having patience. Like we were out in Belleville this week, and a child who clearly was on the spectrum or was neurodiverse in some way was having a full moment in the field, and the mom just like scooped him up and like walked off, and I was
Yeah.
like, good for you, mama. Like I just wanted to go
kept her
up
cool.
and like, yeah, she kept her cool, and I know how hard that is.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like it's hard.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Just wait until they get older too. You've probably experienced this, where I parent mine differently because they need different parenting. But mine are 19 months apart in age, and they're at the age where they notice that I parent them
Oh
differently.
yeah, I was
so
actually
they call
gonna say
me
that.
out on it.
I have twins.
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's
Right.
like, yeah, I get called out on that all the time.
Like,
Girl,
why
I've
are you
always
doing
known though. I've
this?
always been very
Yeah.
transparent about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, me
And
too.
they know that they're very different and that they have different, it's like when I remember going to the school and I had maybe 5 kids in the school, and like, I would run into one kid's class and be like, hey, you're not going to hear from me all year, but if there's something lower than a B on a report card, I should know about it first.
Yeah.
There, I'm out.
Yeah.
And the other one, I meet
You're
with
gonna hear from me every
3
day.
days. I've got, I've got IEP meetings. I've got a team
Yeah.
that goes in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
understand. And I do think just communicating with them about the reasons why, and from a very young age, they will understand.
Yeah.
And my kids have never been jealous of each other, and they've
Yeah.
never been competitive with each other. They've
Mhm.
always been supportive siblings. And I think it is about, but yes, they certainly will call you
Oh,
out.
yeah.
And we're in a
100%.
tiny school, so they always have the same teachers back to
Oh,
back.
shoot.
So they get my type A student who holds everything in straight A's but holds all her feelings in and has that restraint rage at home. So
Yeah,
if there's ever
right.
behavioral stuff, I see it. The school would
Yeah.
never see it.
She's
They
perfect.
get her first. And then the next
Surprise!
year they get my
Yeah.
second child, and I'm like, we're gonna talk a lot more this year. You're gonna have a lot more close relationship with me now, because this is the child with anxiety, and this is the child that needs more advocating for and more support. And so, yeah, they get the one and then the other, and it's like
And
I
then
could be a
they're
different
sometimes
parent.
shocked, right? Because they're like, how could a family with 2 kids? Like, I
Yeah,
know, I've
yeah.
had that too. They expect, like, you get posy, and then I had my next one who was a total, just a monkey. Turned out great.
Yeah.
But wow, and I said to my mom, I need to warn the kindergarten teacher that this one's not going to be like posy. And she's like, my mom's like, don't you dare. And first day, got the call. I'm like, I know, my mom wouldn't let me warn you.
Yeah. And you say warn like lovingly, like
Yeah,
all
of
3 of your
course.
kids are amazing. I love all 6
Yeah.
of your kids. I go to Julie's house and I'm like,
Yeah.
I love all of her children. One of them is like, 2 of them are in their 20s now, right? I say
Yes,
children, they're older,
yes, yes.
but they're wonderful. And I'm
21,
like, I love, mine are both amazing, but yeah,
It's
like
different.
it's
Different.
very different children.
Yeah.
And you know what? It'd be boring if they were all the same.
Yep.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Every time I had one, I'd be like, now what are you going to bring to this party? What is your party trick?
Moms Unleashed approaches parenting in a very real, raw, and unfiltered way. At the heart of who we are, we believe in giving everyone a space to discuss their genuine feelings and experiences in parenthood without judgment. And we look at parenthood for what it really is: hard. This is why Susie Begin, founder of Alpha's Discovery Kids and author of Learn to Play, the 4 Pillars learning system, aligns so perfectly with not just this episode on being a working mom, but with our Moms Unleashed brand too. She's trying to help parents feel better about themselves, just as we are. Susie's mission is to educate parents through her book and children through her daycare, just as they are. This is true love. To accept someone as they are and to do what's best for them. In essence, we are both spreading love. So thank you, Susie, for sponsoring this episode of Moms Unleashed. You can find Susie online at Alpha Kids on Instagram, and her book, Learn to Play, is available through Amazon. So we need to start wrapping it up, but I'm
Okay.
going to pull one card from some of the questions that we got. I'm just going to pull it randomly.
Oh, internet questions.
Ooh. Can you just pull out the best one?
I don't like, yeah, let's pull the best one. I don't like that one.
Can I read it?
Hold on.
Like in my
There's
head.
this one. We talked about some of these. Okay, so this one, I feel like this is very stereotypical. No, we kind of talked about that one. Hold on. No,
You do, it feels right, Annie.
I don't know.
Can we give it to somebody without the ADD?
Okay.
Good luck.
Okay, so it says, how do you deal with having a career and the demands of home life? And they said cooking and cleaning, which I feel is very stereotypical of a
Yeah.
woman. So I'm just gonna change the question a little bit. I order takeout all the freaking time because that's just the only way that I cook. But like, what does balance look like in your homes for you?
There's no such thing as balance in my home.
Balance,
right?
But like, how do you?
So I got a cleaning lady.
By
That was like
balance
the
it-
best investment
yeah.
ever. That just took a huge load off because it primarily fell
Yeah.
on me to do.
Yeah.
So that she will stay with me forever. And that was a huge help. So if you can afford it, again, I know
I
that
know.
I am privileged that I can do that. But if that's something that you can afford, or if you can sacrifice something to do that, that would be a recommendation for me.
Yeah.
But in terms of cooking, like I just do it. I don't know. Yeah.
So I always say if you can't afford have somebody help with cleaning, feed your kids more craft dinner.
yeah.
Save the money.
Yeah. Like
because
what
that
are
is
you
a
gonna say?
really like
It's
that's
a huge
I think
help.
it's for a working family. Like I
Totally.
think it's important, and it's cheaper than marriage therapy. So
Well, it depends what your
100%.
triggers are, right? Like,
Right.
if you and your husband can live with like a certain extent, like a certain level of chaos, and you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Like for me, I hate it when the house is dirty, but I can live with it being messy.
100%.
Yeah.
So like, but my husband's the exact opposite.
Right.
He can walk into the bathroom and it'd be like, oh, the sink is kind of grimy. I'll see that, he won't. But if there's like one paper at a place, he's like, oh my god, and he can't function.
Yeah.
So we did the same thing. We waited until I was working full time, and then the first thing we did was hire a cleaner to come every other week. And that, like you said, cheaper than marriage therapy. That was something for us that was like a trigger where we would bicker about it, and as soon as it was taken care of, because my husband and I don't bicker a lot. We get along really well. I cook, he
What's
cleans.
that like?
Yeah, my husband's the cleaning Mary.
Yeah.
Like I don't clean well enough, and that. But
I'd
I
be
love
like,
cooking.
leave it to you then, honey.
Yeah,
Show
and
me
he
how it's
does,
done.
and he does such an amazing job. But I love cooking. Like I won't give up
amazing.
cooking. So
Yeah.
like
I actually really
Cooking-
enjoy
Sure
cooking.
you
too.
yeah,
appreciate
cooking
that.
Yeah.
is
It's
my.
a therapy for some
It is.
people.
It is.
It is.
Like.
But it is funny too, like that whole working from home thing too, because I've got some friends who are like, well, it's hard to work from home because, you know, the laundry's there. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't call my name.
Yeah.
I'm good
Shut
just
your
to leave it where
door.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't bother me. I do find for me being very organized helps. So I'd say two things for me. I do meal plan. I have a thing on the wall that says there's 4 weeks, different meal each time, and I'll be like, if Wednesdays run around, everybody's got hockey, then that's, you know, one Wednesday it's bacon eggs for dinner, one Wednesday it's pancakes for dinner. Like we
Yeah.
will go low key.
Yeah.
We'll do bigger meals when everybody's home. Kids can help with that stuff, and then it really helps too, making the kids independent, making them do chores. You
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
they could be making
I
their
know.
own lunches by grade 3.
Julie's-
Absolutely.
You're
That
such
was a
an
game
inspiration.
changer.
Like Julie's such an inspiration to me for like where I need to learn to let go.
Yeah.
And where
For us all.
where I need to learn to let go, and where I should treat myself to things that will make my life easier. Like you
Yeah.
have shown me the value in doing that for myself, and
No shame.
you're a big reason why I got tired. Like was just like, you know what, I'm doing it. I'm gonna put my kids in childcare, and my career spiraled after that into
Yeah.
like a place where I could sustain it. So thank you.
And it's not like childcare is child abuse.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
a blast. I
Yeah.
mean, they're with
Yeah.
their buddies and
Yeah.
like.
Actually,
Yeah.
I find daycare makes me feel so much better about not stressing at home. It's
Yeah.
like if she doesn't eat her dinner, or if she does, you know,
Yeah.
we put something that's really not that healthy together, I'm like, she ate great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's true.
Amazing.
I know
childcare.
she's getting
Amazing.
vegetables
She's
or
doing your
protein.
craft. She's doing
She's
your
healthy.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it actually we don't worry. Like
Yeah.
if she
Yeah.
eats a banana for dinner or
Yeah.
a cookie or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever. Like it's we
That's-
don't allow it to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the lowering your standards
Yeah.
thing though too. That people always think that sounds so bad. I mean, you say it, I say it, and I don't mean lower your standards like just be like whatever happens happens. But what I mean is like for us, I cook. My husband cleans up after dinner. If the playroom is covered in toys, like
Yeah.
like you know what I mean? Like
Right.
we've decided that's
Pick
the
your
priority.
battles.
He
Yeah.
needs the kitchen
Yeah.
to be clean.
Yeah.
I want the kids to have a good meal.
Yeah.
But I also do the thing where I'm like, everyone's having grilled cheese tonight. I can't do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Gotta
Yeah.
give it to grilled cheese.
Absolutely.
Okay, you guys, we gotta wrap up because these guys gotta jet back to Toronto. So thank you guys so much for being here and having these important conversations. I think so many moms can relate to them, and I hope all of you, if you can, eat more KG, get yourself a cleaning lady.
Yeah. That's the takeaway.
And that's the takeaway
And
from
set
this
alarms
chat.
for everything.
And set alarms and just give yourself some grace. I know it's not
Yes.
easy.
Yes. Absolutely.
But when you learn what you can be okay with letting go of, life gets a little bit easier.
For sure.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.